Sojourner truth. You know, I was up in heaven, and the doorbell rang. I went to the door, and there was a messenger from God, and he said, God said for you to come quick. So I went, and God said to me, I want you to go down on earth this morning because Reverend Eleanor at the Unity Church is sick. And she asked Sylvia Walker to do the sermon. And Sylvia is down on her knees praying for help. And she's praying, and I want to answer her prayer. So there have been times when she's spoken about you, so why don't you go down and get inside of her and tell your story about prayer. And I said, but God, she doesn't look anything like me, and she wears those loud colors and sometimes flashy hats, and he said, I promise you I'll tone her down and she'll wear something conservative. So I said, but suppose I startle her. And he said, she sleeps through the sermons and the meditations. She won't even know you're there. So you saw I was sitting here waiting for the Lord's Prayer, and then I jumped inside. And no, this body, I didn't look nothing like this. I wasn't fat. And I'm 6 foot tall, very skinny. I don't have these big hips like this gal has. And I'm very black. And I was born in 1798. And I'm going to tell you about prayer and what prayer can do for you. I was born in New York State in New Platts. Now, in 1817, New York State passed a law, and it said that all slaves over the age of 25 female and 28 male would be set free on the 4th of July in 1828. Well, that was great, but it was sad because slaves didn't have no birth certificates. And we had to rely on the masters to tell us how old we are so we could get free. So, my mama, when I was a little girl, see, I was sold away from my family when I was 8. I was the last of 5 of my parents' children to be sold off. And my mama would say, there's a God up there in the sky. And when you have a problem, you look up into the sky and you pray, and God will answer your prayers if you have faith. She said, sometimes He doesn't answer all of them. But if you pray hard enough, and it's a big enough thing, it'll be answered. So, when I heard this news about getting freed at 25, I went to my special place out on the farm, and I would sit and I would meditate and I would pray to the Lord. I hope I'm 25. I hope I'm 25. So that I could leave. Well, the master called me and he said, you have been such a faithful servant, I'm going to let you go early, a year early. And when the time came, he said, you didn't work hard enough. Because see, I had cut my hair with a sickle. But I still did all my chores. I did more than my chores. He said, you have to wait until the harvest because I need you. So I went out and I prayed. And I prayed and God told me to leave. So I had a small infant. I had 5 other children, but they were grown and some of them sold off. But I worried about my infants, so I got up early in the morning before the sun came up, and I just took my baby and I walked down the road. And I came to some Quaker's house, and those Quakers, they were nice people, and they took me in. Well, then the master came with the horse and wagon, and he stood out there and he hollered, "Isabella! Isabella!" Because Isabella was my name. Isabella Dumont. See, the slaves took the name of their masters, so I was Dumont. I can't tell you how many names, because I was sold off long before this rule came. He called me, and the Quaker man, he went out and he said, "She's not coming out." He said, "Get her out here." Well, I was inside praying, and I went outside and I said, "I'm not getting in that wagon." He said, "Get in this wagon." I said, "The Lord told me I didn't have to go, and I'm not going." And do you know what? That Quaker man, he paid my master $25 for me and my baby. And my master was satisfied. $25 was a lot of money in those days. And so he went on, and I stayed with those people until I worked off the $25. Now, they liked my baby, and they took good care of him. Now, I had another son who was 5 years old, and I said, I'm going to find him. And so I went and traveled to the farm where he had been sold to, and I knocked on the door, and I asked about him, and the lady said, "What? You in here worried about some little nigger? He's off in Kentucky with my daughter. He's her lap slave, and she got married and he's gone." Well, there was also a law that said it was against the law for a master to sell his slave across the state line in order to avoid setting them free. So I prayed. I went in my little corner, and I prayed, and I talked to God, and God talked to me, and God said, "Go to the courthouse." You know, slaves couldn't go to the courthouse. Women didn't even go to the courthouse. And so I went, and I stood there. I didn't have shoes on my feet. You know, I didn't have shoes in New York State until I was 28 years old. And I stood there in the courthouse, and I asked for help. And somebody said, "Oh, there's a lawyer down the street. He'll help you." And he did. And he took my case, and we went to court, and the judge gave me back my son. Prayer works. I got my son, and we went to New York City, and somebody took him and put him into a boarding school where he learned how to be a seaman. And later on, he went off to sea as a cabin boy. But they didn't have a whole lot of rules on those ships, and I never, ever saw my son again. But what I did was, I joined the church. See, I didn't know nothing about Jesus. I just knew about God. So I was passing this church, and people were singing and shouting, and so I went in. They were beating on the tambourine. And on Monday, they would go in the red light district, and they would try and get them gals to do good and to come to church. Well, eventually, they got them. They would come to church on Sunday, and they'd be hanging out the window on Monday.